Hello, and welcome to Educational Triage, where we discuss issues in alternative education. This is a discussion about teaching, by teachers, for teachers, and others who are interested in the alternative education world. We hope you find today's episode relevant, engaging, and useful. And if you do, please subscribe. I'm Tony Hunt, and I'm here to help guide you with the help of my friends Christy and Philip. And welcome back, everybody, to another rousing edition of Educational Triage, where we are joined by Christy Goodell. And Philip Summers.
Aloha.
And tonight we have a wonderful topic, and our topic this evening is about learning disorders and anxiety. And so we're going to play a little 2-on-1 tennis tonight because, Christy, you are the expert on special ed here, and you have all the vital information that we probably need. So Philip and I will probably be hitting some balls over your way, and you can bap them back with the answers. How's that?
The tennis references. So, and I'm giggling because they don't have 2-on-1. Like, it's doubles or singles, right? You don't do.
Oh, Christy,
Yeah,
you're
rightly
so old school.
Yeah, little odds on there. The two will always pretty much win. Yeah.
Well, you right, yeah. So why would that be a thing? That doesn't sound right at all.
Oh dear, you are so old school.
I'm literal. So the topic today, right?
So,
sorry. Go ahead.
Is anxiety the new learning disorder, right? And so I don't mean to put you on the spot, but are you beginning to feel a little bit of dread or anything like that? Because first of all, what I would like to know is what qualifies as a learning disorder?
So
in layman's terms.
So
people like me and Philip can understand.
So in a nutshell, in terms of special education at the school level, our special ed department, look at students who their academics are impacted to a significant degree over a long period of time. So their academics are suffering for certain reasons. And then we do kind of like a whole battery of assessments and evaluation. We look at data just to kind of see like, are you struggling because you have not gotten instruction in this area that you currently are now not being successful in, right? Are you doing that for lack of attendance? Is it being taught in a language that's not your primary language, right? So you kind of parse all that out. And if the person doesn't meet any of those categories and is still having an impact on their academics, then we kind of start looking at where are some of those deficits. And so we do there's all these different assessments out there, that are formalized and timed, and you have a script so that every person is basically being assessed in the same manner with the same parameters. And then you kind of compare them against their peers. So if there is a significant impairment or impact of their academics and they are experiencing deficits in reading, writing, and or math, those are the biggies. They have this specific, right? They have specific learning disorders in these categories. You can have it in all three categories. You might just have it in math, right? Or it could just be your reading and writing's impacted. Okay. So that's kind of the long version. A person can have a disability, but their academics aren't impacted. And so therefore they wouldn't necessarily qualify for special education, like at the high school level, right? We've got.
So give an example.
I might, talking about anxiety, I might have, and it doesn't always have to be a learning disorder. I might have a physical impairment. And so I might have a physical disability, but I'm still able to get around the school. Right. If you kind of, depending on what my impairment is, then, if I'm deaf, right? If I have an interpreter, boom. And then I'm able to be successful in my classes. I'm not necessarily, my academics aren't suffering solely for that reason. I might
Right.
have ADHD, but I'm able to manage it myself in my classes with like a fidget, or I take breaks, or I work for 15 minutes. I chunk my work, right? And I'm still able to be successful. So even though I might have a disability, it's not impacting my scholastics, if that makes sense.
Because you have coping
Yeah,
mechanisms.
I've developed strategies, or I've been taught them at some point in my educational career, and so I'm able to use those. Um,
Okay.
like if I have dyslexia, right, that I may just have tools that I can, I read slower, I do colors, right? Like, or I do a ruler to, what are you, Tony, making faces? Speaking of ADHD. So I can have strategies if I'm reading. And so, or I just read slower, or I read it out loud. There's strategies I can do, and I still can maintain the coursework in my classes, just like my other peers, and my academics is not impacted.
Got it. Now, do you, what's going to be our running definition for anxiety then?
Yeah, see, that's such a interesting one that's being
Right.
focused.
It's being bandied about because, so I began the year with a student who I was told had incredible anxiety,
Mhm,
and to the point where could you speak to one other student or figure something out, and they were reduced to a blob of tears,
mhm,
but the next day they were fine. Um, and then other people, that I have parents who tell me my child has incredible
mhm,
anxiety, and
right,
so we're trying to work through all this anxiety, and the kid is actually pretty okay, if you ask me.
right.
And it seems to me that during this time of COVID, and maybe it's within the last 5-10 years, once social media has really taken off,
Yeah, that's
and everything that's been going on with that, and the separation, because we don't have those natural one-on-one relationships with people
right.
anymore, and everything is
Mhm,
online. um, I don't know if that's one of the causes of it, but it seems as though this seems to be happening more and more. And
right.
just the idea of having to directly interact with people is something. So, could that be considered a disability or a learning disorder?
I would
Because we'll get into disabilities
Right.
later.
And so we have different so we, the state I'm in, right? In the Department of Education, they categorize
Hmm.
disabilities, basically codes, right? So if I have a student that if I am a person that has autism, right, and I have a diagnosis, that's going to be I'm this category. If I have other health impairments, right, I have and ADHD falls under that. So that's a different one. If I'm impacted with my specific learning disability, reading, writing, math, right, that's a different category, but it's all under the umbrella of special education. So you kind of gave the example of anxiety. If let's say I'm a student and transitions are hard for me, starting a new school, starting a new schedule freaks me out.
Hmm.
Blood pressure, panic attacks. But if I'm able to come ahead of time, I get my schedule ahead of time. I can see where all my classes are. I can meet my counselor. I can, I'm given a map of the school so I know where to go. I know the bell schedule, right? So all those things that like give me anxiety and prevent me from being successful, if I take those barriers away, can I still engage in my routine and my academics? And so if my answer is yes, still doesn't mean I'm not suffering from panic attacks, or I don't have a anxiety, or if I've even had it medically diagnosed, but it's not impacting my
Hmm.
academics to the point where I need special education, which means I need more instruction within my day in order to maintain or be successful in my academics.
But what if I'm going to use myself as an
Sure.
example, and this is all
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
hypothetical.
Right. Wink. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Stop. Okay. So let's say that I'm school phobic.
Yep.
I don't want to go to school. I can't be around all those
Yep.
people all
Right.
day long. Um, is that a disability?
So
Is that a learning disorder? Because how am I supposed to learn if I'm constantly worried about whatever? That common thing that most people get, they when they go to the gym, they think that everybody's watching them because they're very self-conscious. That's the word I'm
right,
thinking of,
self-conscious.
self-consciousness. So every I go there and I'm just extremely self-conscious. I'm overly self-conscious, and I think that everybody's looking at me, and if somebody's smiling, then they're making fun of me. And I'm just so uncomfortable. So is that I can't really learn like that, can I? If I'm that overwhelmed with these feelings
Right.
of angst.
Your ability to learn is impacted. And so I would not me, but like one could categorize as like you have a disability that would kind of fall under that other health impairment, right? Sometimes it can be um, the term is emotionally disturbed, and sometimes that the word disturbs is kind of has a negative connotation, but like it's hard to stay emotionally regulated. So if we just use other health impairment, right? My panic attacks, my anxiety causes me to not engage in my education. But if I was able to either be taught strategies or I change the environment, could you go into your class or and be presented, 10th grade curriculum and still be able to understand it? Yes, then that's that other health impairment. If I'm still struggling to read at that grade level, that's the learning disability. I am not able to understand the reading comprehension. Like I'm struggling with I don't have the foundations to be successful in my math class. Even though I've had really good
Mm-hmm.
instructions, I've been attending, it's
Okay.
in my native language. I've had opportunities to engage, right? I've been given all
Right.
that stuff
So
and
my
I'm still demonstrating some pretty significant deficits in the comprehension, learning disability. If my anxiety and
right.
emotional regulation, the behavior is impacting me, that's the barrier, then we tend to categorize that, at least in our state, as either other health impairment like ADHD, um, kind of that category, or ED, emotional disturbance. Does that make sense? Like one's more the behavior and regulation, and the other one is like, can your brain process and comprehend the academia?
So would that put it into the category of a 504 then?
The so the big difference between a 504, which is just a code for a type of plan, is that you're basically changing how stuff is taught to you. So you're getting extra
Mm-hmm.
time, you get breaks, they give you hard copies of notes, you might have a live scribe, you might have, if I'm visually impaired, they're just going to make the copies of my book font 30, right? Like, but they're not changing my actual curriculum, and I'm not getting extra instruction in my day that other students aren't in order for me to be successful. That's special education. I need more instruction
Okay.
than what is provided to gen ed students in order to be successful. That's the special ed part.
Okay. So that's where and then because I was really curious and I went and I looked up the definition of a disability because I was
Mm-hmm.
curious as to whether or not if you had anxiety, you could receive benefits through Social
Right.
Security and get
Yep.
SSI. And I was also looking to see because I know that you can have special ed services if you are
Mm-hmm.
ADHD. But and I was having troubles
There's so
finding
much stuff out there. And
ADHD under the disability, but then I actually unearthed it. So, but what they say through the SSI is anxiety disorders such as OCD, panic disorders, phobias, or PTSD are considered a disability and can qualify for disability benefits.
mm-hmm.
But you need to prove that your anxiety makes it impossible to work. You must submit evidence showing your anxiety disorder matches the SSA's Blue Book
Right. And
requirements.
that's a whole nother category because
So,
there's a lot of law there. It's like that's other people are
right, right,
experts in that,
right.
right?
But I suppose, yeah. But so let's take anxiety and let's move more with it, because how if we have more students that are coming in with
Right.
anxiety, have you had any
Mhm.
referrals based on anxiety lately?
Ye it's hard to answer because yes, but not as like, "This kid's anxious, sped," but it's more but there's like it that one gets wrapped up in a whole bunch of other stuff, right? Like, usually it's so hard to answer this because every kid's different, but, like, usually you don't come, like, with perfect attendance and you're getting really good grades and I'm super anxious. Right? Like, usually something else is happening in
Hmm.
addition to that. I'm super anxious, and so I might come to my classes, but the test day comes and I just shut down. I bomb. I blank out. Tear my test up. And then the teacher's like,
Right,
"Wow."
but that's test
Well, I mean, but
anxiety.
there's
Here's
the
some
anxiety,
insight.
right? What are you anxious? Are you
Yeah.
anxious about coming? And there's other kids who are like, I can't handle the crowds. I can't handle getting called out in class. I can't handle the
This the scritching of the pencil
yeah,
by
the
other people.
non-instructional time, like those transition periods, right? Passing time, assemblies, those are for some people horrific, right? But the work time in the class, they can manage it. But then, that so what can you do? We can put alternate passing time. You can leave a couple minutes early, beat the crowds. During assemblies, we will provide you an alternate location. Or like now we can embrace technology. We
Okay.
can live stream it and you can be in another spot. So you're still participating in your free and public education, but it just might look a little
Right.
different. But OHI is that kind of big catch all, which I think anxiety is getting moved into because it can also, I've got kids who have, diabetes. And so they just
Hmm.
need some adjustments and they need some supports built into their day. Um,
And OHI is other
other
health
health
impairment,
impairment,
right?
right? And so I have
Okay.
another
Right.
student who has um, Tourette's, and so they qualify for special education under that because they're just learning how to like, how do I manage this? How do I advocate if I'm struggling? Or what are like some social emotional strategies or word choices when this is happening so that I can be successful in class? But they can still read
Okay.
their reading novels. They can still do their algebra work, right? Like the comprehension
Right.
isn't the problem. So it's not a learning disability, but their medical condition is impacting their academics because if I have um I know of a student who like has diabetes and so they have to miss class a lot, right? If
Right.
I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go. I can't A teacher can't be like, "Well, I'm sorry, the pass is out," right? Like it's going to impact me, right? And if I'm leaving class, I'm missing instruction, so my academics might be impacted that way. So by having
Right.
a plan, we can then work to support what her day looks like. How can she advocate? That kind of
Got it.
stuff. Oh my gosh, I need water. I
Okay.
feel like I'm
Philip.
talking. Blah.
Yeah, I asked that question actually because I don't have a home school, and so I did a little verbal research, just kind of asking around. Is anxiety a new learning disorder? Are you seeing that pop up on the landscape? And the answer was, oh yeah, especially there was an inner city school here in
Yeah.
Portland. I talked to a counselor, and she said it is just rampant. She said there's a variety of reasons. The pandemic really spread a lot of anxiety, obviously, in very many ways.
Yeah.
Different ways.
Hmm.
One of the ways is that it's kind of like pervasive, the anxiety. Educators don't know what they're doing. They really don't have a plan for the future, and it's kind of hanging in there. And the students are looking toward them, and they're unsure of what's going on, and they're kind of unsure about what they're doing about their future. And then the COVID thing is kind of like, do we wear a mask? Do we not wear masks? And that's just raising everybody's level of anxiety. And some of the kids were on the edge, and we've
Hmm.
always been dealing with them. And so, and like Christy said, that for a variety of reasons, there are multitudes of reasons. Yeah. But
Yeah.
generally speaking,
Yeah.
yeah, anxiety is a big, big factor. And then, yeah,
It's
go
just, I
ahead.
think the only catch that I kind of keep getting hung up on a little bit is that just because I have students that have a learning
Mhm.
disability, and that is not the
Yeah,
same as anxiety, right? Those are different
exactly.
categories.
We're
They
talking
Right,
both,
right.
504 versus IEP and learning disabilities. And that was
well,
also, we
not
have to
even,
clarify that too.
yeah. I mean, not even
Yeah.
like with 504. I mean, you can be on an IEP and have like a generalized anxiety disorder, right?
Mhm.
But it's just because their chronic
Mhm.
anxiety, their excessive worrying, it's impacting them throughout
I
their
was just going to
day.
mention that there is a
Yeah.
nuance to that we know as professionals that would be extremely difficult to explain to listeners if they weren't in education.
I
Because
know.
we know that, for example, you got a kid who they'd say, well, how many kids here are on an IEP? And depending on the classroom, at least in my classroom, all of them were, I tended to
Yeah.
all of their education
Mhm.
plans. Some of them on formal ones, which meant I had to go to meetings, but I worked
Right.
on
Yeah,
all
you're
of their
coming to
plans as individuals. And
right.
then another thing would be, what's an educational plan versus a 504? I mean, I did 504s for kids when I wanted to kind of bend rules, but they were perfectly great accommodations. Now,
Right,
I
and you're
left
bending
the way
how
it
they
was
got
phrased
there.
to you
Yeah.
guys. Yeah. And so I was willfully ignorant of that because attention public, special education people work their asses off with so much paperwork qualifying this for the feds that
Yeah.
they are saints among humans. They
Aw.
should just worship the ground they tread upon because they put up with so much so our kids can have an education. They work
Yeah.
really hard behind the scenes coding this stuff so that we can do our jobs. And
Right.
so I let them do their jobs and I administered what they told me to do with the
Yeah.
most nuance I could. And so, yeah, it's a tough job, but yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So, okay. So, do you think that this high level of anxiety, because it really did start, we started seeing some, it's starting to impinge on the
Yeah.
kids pre-COVID because of social media, because they're real, I hate using this term. Kids have siloed themselves and parents have endorsed it because the cell phone thing and just being online and being on
Mhm.
Facebook and Snapchat and just all these other things. And then we go in and we have all these weird things that are happening during COVID. We have the media that is making boku bucks in a sense because they are like scaring the heck out of people, telling them all kinds of things, and they're fighting each other. And, it's, and they're changing terms. They're doing, I mean, there is such a manipulation, but that's what the media does. And I like the fact that I look at media and the news as a form of entertainment because you're looking at somebody else's interpretation of what's actually going
More and more,
on,
right?
and they will mess with your mind, and they're about making money. And if they can gin you up, then you're going to do something, and that's going to make you do, and you're do something, and then they can catch it on the news, and et
Right.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have all of this going on. You have the protests that are happening all across the world. I mean, people aren't really sure what's what
Right.
anymore. And the government is in turmoil as well. And you're not sure of who is who and who's trying to set other people up. I'm really going to have to put this out there, but I believe that gaslighting is becoming almost normalized among people. We talked in our last episode about
Yeah, it's increasing for sure, right?
why teachers are leaving. Yeah, why teachers are leaving education and gaslighting. I don't think we hit
Mm-mm.
that one quite enough
We
because
had so many other
a lot of
categories to
people have.
talk about. Go ahead.
Oh, I know, but gaslighting by administrators is just incredible, and it's really happening a lot.
I watched a
So,
perfect example of it at supposed walkout over masks at a high school I was subbing at. They had co-opted
Oh.
the protest and they walked out for a 15-minute break. They made sure they didn't take their masks off till they're outside, and the students just had a 15-minute break. And they make sure you're in class on time, put your mask on before you enter the building. They heard there was going to be a walkout, so they said, "We support you," and then put rules around it. Just basically gave me a 15-minute break. I thought, well, that's not a protest. It was very interesting. I thought, oh, that's gaslighting, really,
Right.
is what this is. Yeah. Beat a bang. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah, no. I mean, but the thing is that we have parents that are going crazy. I hear
Yeah.
teachers who are going nuts because there are people who are terrified of COVID, and they get upset because some people aren't as freaked out as they are, and
Right.
so there's like it's so convoluted, and so nobody knows anymore what to believe. You
Right.
really don't. You really don't. And I think that that has given an imbalance to people's natural what's the word
Resiliency or being able to
timber.
well,
True
and if you're
north.
always
Just
yeah, and it's hard because I mean,
yeah,
especially for
yeah,
kids, if you're always at, part of becoming an adult, right, is like you have to develop resiliency. You get stressed out, something freaks you out, you learn to, power through
right.
it, or you problem solve, or maybe it's horrible and then you kind of come back down, and then hopefully you kind of
It's
either
worse than that.
evaluate, but it's up and down, right? I'm in a horrible spot. I hopefully can make it through, and then I'm calm again. And then I get anxious again. I worry. And
Right.
so, but what's happening, I think, is
Mhm.
that it's a visual, right? The temperature, the throttle is just always running. So if you're just always running all the time and there's not really stuff provoking it, right? Like that's that anxiety. And if that's, kids are just like, what does that mean? I'm like, that feeling you get right before a test, or, um, I'm trying to think of like before a big race, right? You're going to do a big race and you just are like, your stomach's all tight and you're fired up and like, right. You're like anxious,
Or you're about to be shot up in a slingshot or do a bungee jump over a
right? Or like
canyon,
right at the roller
you
coaster,
know.
right? It's coming, it's coming. And you're just anxious, anxious,
Right.
anxious.
As you're coming up the
Yeah.
hill.
And I said, that
Anxiety.
feeling, and then it goes away, right? And so I try to explain to students, I'm like, what if that feeling was how you felt all day? It never let up. It just felt like that roller coaster is about to dip. The starting gun for the race is going to be any second, and that's how you feel all the time. Well, it's super hard to
But
be
this
like,
one goes to 11.
yeah,
No,
this
it
goes to
goes to
11.
11.
And so that's like
Yeah.
that. So absolutely, that's
Yeah.
if the kids don't
It's just
develop that, if
noise.
they
Yeah.
had to spend the past 2
Yeah.
years trying to figure that out by themselves in front of a screen, they don't have those social norms or other kids to kind
Yeah.
of model on purpose or just by
Yeah.
subconsciously, right? Oh, I see other kids, this is how they look, so they can kind of model it. That was gone. And
Yeah.
so that's hard to adapt. Now they're just trying to
They've
learn.
innovated like crazy.
Yeah, so that's why I do
And
agree
they've
that,
rebelled too,
well, we're
because
seeing
they
a lot
realize
of
that they
the,
don't have to sit 45 minutes in a classroom to get something done. They figured out
yeah,
how to get it
right. So
done, get it turned in, get the grade, and get out of Dodge. And
right.
now they're being
And
told they have to sit there for 45 minutes like before, and they're going, wait a minute, I liked it the way we were doing it during the pandemic. And
right.
it's still pandemic. So
Yeah.
what
Or those
gives?
environmental norms. Like if I'm online, right, and I don't want to listen, click, I
Mm-hmm.
just turn off my camera, or I can turn off my mute, or I can do
Mm-hmm.
both
Or I
and I
just
can
leave
leave. And there's
class.
not any
Mhm.
environmental pressures that are telling you to stay. Like in a
Mm-hmm.
classroom, it's a lot harder to stand up and walk right
Mm-hmm.
out, right? Like, I don't really like this. So that's gone. And so
Yeah, I've seen
developing
that.
that resiliency and or those coping skills have not occurred for the past 2 years. And so now we're back in it, like
But
Philip
they're
said.
not,
And so
we don't offer them any reason to have coping skills or resiliency, because the classrooms never really were the greatest places to be anyway. And that's the problem. And we're having them go back into classrooms that are,
Explain
well,
that.
yeah, I don't know if I
well, the
technically agree with that.
classrooms didn't fulfill the learning needs that they had. These kids their learning needs need to come faster than the classrooms will deliver it. I'm a firm believer in that. The way we deliver education now is slow and ill-suited to the way it needs to be delivered. First
True.
off, they
Like, I
sit
mean,
too
they're
long in schools. Schools are
right.
daycares, basically,
And we've talked
fundamentally
about that on
social
like previous
daycares.
episodes. But of the
Yeah,
Yeah.
and these
two,
kids know
right?
it, and they don't have the guidance. They should be mentored, not given worksheets. And so I
But that
saw them
ability,
taking given the worksheets. They know worksheets are just make work, and so they have a network of copying worksheets. I've seen that happen because they have electronic. They have digital transfer. Our generation didn't have digital transfer. It had to be physical transfer. They do it instantaneously. They also have 2-screen monitoring. They can play a game and do the work depending on the level of involvement the work takes. I've seen that happen all the time. We're incapable of that. We didn't train ourselves to do that. There's all kinds of ways they cope with the world that we can't possibly imagine. Yet we set up a system that has been going for at least 75 to 100 years. No wonder they don't like it.
You're talking about one segment of the population. I still have segments of the population that would prefer not to, that uses their, let's call them the Chromies, the Chromebooks,
the Chromebooks,
or a computer.
Yeah.
They use those as a word processor, basically.
Yeah.
And they also use it to look up information. But other than that, they're not as adept either at doing all of that because they don't want to do that. There are some people who are better with people than they are with being online.
Right.
So I think what you're saying, I understand what you're saying and I agree with it, but then you also have the other side of that.
Yeah.
So, but here's something that I'm going to throw out now, and it's something that that I'm going to toss to you. And do you believe? Okay, so let's say Tommy Thumbsucker.
Oh gosh, there's a.
And
go ahead. Sorry.
TT.
Poor Tommy.
I'm always pick
TT.
TT.
Not
I
better.
can't remember his sister's name.
Better.
Tina.
Anyhow.
The T family. Tommy and Tina.
So Tommy Thumbsucker is in there and he can't stop sucking his thumb because he is so anxious about everything. Now, let's say that because how large are actual classrooms, and sometimes classrooms just move along. And if I've got a little bit of ADHD, because if you have ADHD, you're more prone to depression and you're more prone to anxiety as well. And I'm just going off of some research that I was reading and over the years. So he is not comfortable in this class, and the class does move quickly. I mean, it's got a lot of activity. It's got a lot of stuff going, but some of it just sort of slides off the bacon grease on his brain. And he's not able to catch it in the pan. It just goes out his ear as wax. And he just can't figure things out. And so he's feeling less than, and we never want a student to feel less than. Right. So would it be better for him to be relegated, and I hate to use that term, to something smaller, which would be more of an alternative learning environment? Because we need to find the least restrictive environment for all students.
That's the key word there.
And I think, right. And I think that lends itself to what Philip is talking about. I mean, if kids need a faster environment, that would be fantastic. I don't think the district's going to buy it because I think that districts are becoming a business model, which is something we're going to talk about in a later episode. But because they go for the hours that students are in their desks, and that's how they're funded.
But going back to our
and so if you
student or anxious student in a large comprehensive in a large school, right? Large
compulsory education.
Gosh, I'm
sorry. Is that what you're
comprehensive and/or compulsory?
Thank you. Comprehensive. Gosh, how many days of the week have we been in? Go ahead. Yes. So our student who is struggling in this large environment.
Would it not make more sense in a way for them to be in a smaller learning environment? Now, granted, you're going to end up having a lot of students that need that, and maybe you don't have the space in the school, but at the national average of monies that go towards student, I can't remember what year this was, that this data came from, is $10,000 per student.
That's it.
And I think it was relatively, this is like 2019, 2020. And yeah, well, $10,000 is a lot.
Well, it was $4,000 in 1990 something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's gone up.
Yeah, so is everything.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you have that money, and is it really being used to provide an LRE for every student? Because if a student's anxious, they probably having a smaller environment would
Right.
ease the anxiety, wouldn't it? I'm throwing this
Yeah.
out there
And
to you.
those are, I mean,
I
those are,
personally think that's the plan. I think that you say relegate, but I say that's what everyone should be entitled to, is the environment that they're least restricted in. And that means smaller environments, building high schools that look like
Right.
gigantic campuses, and then making students fit into that is a certain plan for failure. And we're seeing those plans of failure act themselves out year after year. And yet we say, what's going on? What's going wrong? That's what's going wrong, and that's what's going on. And then we build schools with big funding and build them bigger. And that's just the opposite of what we should do. We should invest the money in smaller environments,
Mhm.
yeah.
because we already talked about that. The first thing is relationships. You build the relationships,
Right.
you get the investment, and the kid will do the
Mhm.
things. And
Because I will have
Right.
parents and kids come and be like, I do really great when you just explained it to me one-on-one. I'm like, well, who wouldn't? Right? If I got one person giving me attention when I need it and giving it in my method of learning, of course I'm
Yep.
going to do great. Right? As opposed to sitting
Yep.
in a large lecture hall in college, right? Like, am I really going to check in, as opposed to if the eyeballs are looking at me, like I'm going to definitely pay more attention. Right? But like one-on-one tutoring is not, like Tony was saying, is not the least restrictive environment. That's not what works. It's not feasible, right? Like I would love to give one-on-one tutors for every single student. I think they do great, but that's not really the, that's not what
Mhm.
school looks like all the time. That's tutoring.
Right.
And
Right.
then what
I
happens
don't
to
want
being
to be
able
in a
to
PE
work?
class where dodgeball comes up at all. I want to be in an environment where if when, dodge, I remember dodgeball in PE was like, whoa, dodgeball is just a thing. It's like, well, can I go to a school where dodgeball isn't a thing, because
Right.
it was predatory? And the coach was like, well, that's the way the world works. And it's like, is it really? I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of was, but not
I would not
dodgeball.
pick you for my team,
Oh,
Philip.
Well, I
okay.
learned how to be sneaky instead of just getting pegged in the head, but it was pretty
Right.
raw. It's like,
Right. Don't want to get pegged.
come on.
I loved dodgeball. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
I saw it as
I
a
was,
It
teacher, and I
really
went,
was
now
for
I can
me.
see those guys kind of enjoyed this. It's like, see that
I
kid
can
there, he's going to get pegged about 8 times.
watch out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But see, I went to small schools, so we all knew each
Right.
other.
See, that's
And
different.
so
Yeah, it's different if it's small school. I'm talking about
right.
30
And
kids, and
so
5 of them were on the football team, and
right. And if somebody went after you with ill intent, let's say, then there was bad blood between you, and
Oh, I
everybody
see where you're
knew
going.
that.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so, but
yeah,
yeah,
because everyone
but
knew everybody.
so right. So
But it kind
I'm
of goes
gonna
back to like
read
what
this
is
little thing.
reasonable, right? Like it would be wonderful to be able to provide class sizes of like 3 or 4, and you're having Socratic method the whole time, and you've got tons of
Oh, no, I'm
supplies,
talking about a class
right?
size of 7 to 8 was what I had a lot of
Right,
times, and even
which would be
10.
great. But
7 to
7 to 8.
8.
But I mean, at a large high
Well,
school with
12 in
the
the
brick and
core
mortar,
classes. But
are we
yeah.
able to provide class sizes of 7? It's just not feasible
Well,
or reasonable at
Well, will
this
you make it
at this
feasible if it
at this
pays, and it
at this
does.
public
hold on.
education, right? Like we public education, we have to take everybody that's in our boundaries and our districts, right?
Mhm.
We don't get to
Right,
pick and choose and be
right.
like, I don't really want to have that kid. He's really a handful, and she's like not so great
So
either.
Well, that's
Right?
the kids I had.
let me read.
Those are the
Let
kids I
me
had.
read this little thing that says that other than cognitive behavior therapy, which is the best treatment for anxiety, you can make some interventions in the
Oh,
classroom.
for sure. Lots.
So we presented the problem. We talked about what's there, and I'm sure that people are thinking, so what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And so we always want to offer a solution, right? Because not everybody can just sit there and tell the kids, I'm only going to teach you on Mondays, so you can go home, and I'm going to have small classes, and that's simply not going to work. you will be hunted down by the admin and probably the parents.
Right,
But this is from the association. This is from the Association for Middle Level Education. And it says that to begin, assess your level of connection with each of your students. So that would be relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And every student in the school needs to feel an authentic connection for optimal learning. And that doesn't mean just with one person. That means that all the adults, all the people that are there, they all should be there. And I think that this is just really good building etiquette anyway.
And I think connected can also be like you feel safe and secure, right? It's not just having a relationship, but I feel safe and secure in my environment, in my school. And therefore I can develop relationships with staff and or my peers. Check.
Yeah. And if something happens, even though that teacher looks really scary, I know that I can go to them and I can trust that they will help me. So, okay. So consider the following aspects of a student's daily life at school: a safe and secure classroom,
what I just said.
hallway, cafeteria, locker room, bus and grounds. Okay. And there's, I'll put this down in the, I'll put all of this into the show notes because there's a link there that takes you to schoolclimate.org. A solid social emotional learning program that's in place. And we'll have the link for yourselfseries.com. A fair environment. Do students help create rules and consequences? And, to be quite honest, I've always done this. They have to, because how do you get buy-in? Otherwise, it just feels arbitrary to them.
I wrote down on the top of my notes, what's the buy-in? You can't see this, people, on the podcast, but right? What's their collateral? Sorry, I'm interrupting you on every bullet point. Go ahead, Tony. Sorry, not bad.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. That's just how you are. Becky Bedinsky. Okay. A fair environment. Do students help create rules and consequences? So what that means is, because if you have the kids at the very beginning, sit down and what are the expectations? What do you believe that we need to do in order for you to feel safe? And how are we going to enforce these rules? I mean, think about the power that gives to them. And they're going to come up with the same thing anyway. I mean, I did it for I don't know how many decades. And the kids always came up with the same ideas. And then I worked with them on reinforcing it. And Philip, I believe that you worked with positive peer culture as well, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. It was a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's some ideas that you can get from positive peer culture, and I'll put a link onto that.
The thing about that I wanted to add was it took a lot of trusting the students with it too. You had to step back and allow them to process that. And so that was really good.
But yeah. And I think that if you give the students autonomy and they feel as though you trust them, that's highly respectful.
Yeah.
And you step in when they need to be, hey, you need to back off a little, buddy. They get it. They get it. Right. Okay. So a quality feedback system, timely, accurate, and no shaming.
Yeah.
So, how do you give feedback? I mean, sometimes somebody will say, I'm going to fail that test. Well, we're going to find out what you do know, and then we're going to work on what you don't. So how are we going to know what we're going to work on if we don't know what you don't know? So, and I guess that would be a twist to doing that. Is that right?
To try and encourage a student to participate in
and look at what do we do with tests anyway? We use those as an assessment of whether or not the student studied, is basically what it is. Not whether or not we taught the material effectively enough and that they actually got it, because we should be using that as an assessment on our teaching and taking a look and seeing whether or not, why is why are you, Christy, not passing this test? What did I do wrong that kept you from getting there?
Right.
Now, granted, there may be some expectations that weren't met on your part, like
Right.
attendance, and everything like that. But still, that's something that has to come into
Mhm.
play. So if you've been in my class and you're still not getting it, then I need to figure out what I'm going to do in order to help you
Right. Because
best.
obviously continuing in the same pattern and the same path is going to lead to the same results. So what can
Exactly.
be adjusted?
Right. And I think that comes down to more trust. And I think it comes down to making a real connection with
Mhm.
that student. Once they feel as though you're coaching them, then and mentoring them, that will play a big
Yeah.
role in it.
Right.
Just don't be manipulated.
Right. I would also say
Um
timely, it's that predictability as well. Like I know that even like, there's lots of problems with grading and we've done all, the grading for equity and how do you grade, but if I am being asked as a student to do something in my class and then I fulfill that obligation, I do the test, I turn in my project. If it takes a very long time to get feedback back from the
mhm.
staff, from my teacher, like if I don't know what my grade is for 3 weeks, that creates anxiety. That doesn't build trust, right? It needs to be timely with how information on how you're
Right.
doing in class is shared. That,
Mhm.
we get that a
Yeah,
lot in my
it's
field.
kind of like right. And if you think about why do people like sporting events? Because it's timely and it's effective and the feedback happens almost immediately. Same thing with video
Yeah.
games.
Flow state.
So
Flow
I
state.
I
Yeah. Timely feedback. Immediate
yeah,
feedback
right.
increases flow state. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right. And so I'm just thinking, um, whenever I gave tests, I wanted the kids to know almost immediately, and then we could take a look and see what we needed
Right.
to work on, and we could go forward with that.
Yeah.
So a really quick anecdote on that. There was one year I was teaching Julius Caesar to my students. We had the best time with that, and I decided to try something, and I believe that probably there's one or two of you out there that have done this. I gave the students the test a week in advance,
Mm-hmm.
and we went over it every single day.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and then we went about everything else that we were doing. And I told them, I said, now the questions are not going to be in the same order, and the answers are going to be jumbled up because they were multiple choice. And the student said, fine. So I gave them the test, and the kids, oh, they were not happy.
Really?
What?
Yeah, the highest grade was a
Oh
69%.
boy.
Wow. What?
That's
And
interesting.
so, and it was. And so we talked about it. And they said, well, you moved everything. And I said, I told you I was going to do that.
Predictable.
So, so it was an interesting conversation that we had. And it turned out to be a lot of fun
That's a psych
because it
experiment.
was a little,
Yeah.
I was about to say that. So
I wanted to also come
anyway,
back on you said timely, accurate, and no shaming. That no shaming is so huge, especially with like dealing with the anxiety and the panic.
right.
My husband has a story that he remembers in his high school experience. I think it was math, where he was always a little already anxious in that class. And on after tests, like when they would pass them all back, the teacher would pass them out A to F. So whoever got their test back first got the highest score, and then the next highest and pass back. So the longer you had to wait to get your test, you knew the worse you did. And so my husband was just like, well, this sucks. Now everybody knows that I'm like, I don't do well. I'm the worst, right? And so the shaming was
Mhm.
just, he still remembers it to this day. Like that stuck with him, right? Like you can give feedback, and if you would like to address areas of improvement for your students, you don't have to shame them in front of their peers.
Right.
Right?
Right, because it's egg on your own face
Yeah.
if you
Like,
do
what are you
that.
gaining? Why would you pass them all? Like,
Because
yay, you got an A. Oh, here's the last test I'm passing out, Tony. Right? Like,
Mm.
great. Are you going to be motivated to
and
do
I'd be I got an F for fantastic.
F for fabulous? Yeah.
And you got an A for
Eh.
eh.
Yeah, there's some A words.
So here's another interesting one, which is more choices throughout the day, because choices build a sense of self. A sense of self
Yep.
builds resilience. I cannot tell you how anxious that would make me feel.
To not have choices throughout the day?
No, to have too many
Oh, right.
choices. I when I kind of like, in a sense, I like having choices and I like being able to, modify. But if you put me in a Baskin and Robbins, it takes me a very long time. And the more you pester me, the longer it takes me.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
just, what choices, and how often are those choices? Nobody wants to pick something that they're going to be wed to for a long time when they discover that something else was a better choice
Right.
and that one didn't fit what they
I'm going to
needed.
pick the wrong thing.
So
I'm making wrong choices.
so and I'm not sure what they mean by more choices throughout the day.
I
I
think it kind of
mean,
goes to me. It's
do
like
you do
buy-in, right? Like, hey, I've had some choice in some of the classes I'm participating in, right? Hey,
okay. Okay. That
everyone
makes
has
more
to
sense.
do their, I don't know, their English thing this one way. And then I'm over here like, I would love to do a Google slideshow. And they're like, nope, right? Am I going to be, but can I, right? So
Right.
are you able to have the student have some options? They still have to have academic rigor. Right? Kind of like what Philip was saying. Do we all, or like in the group project, you are all going to work together. Well, if I'm the person that just freaks in group projects and I would love to be able to like just work in a pair, or like, can I just have my role identified and I work independently and then I come back to the group? Can that be choice built in versus like, no, screw you, you're all in a group? Like, oh, great, I have no buy-in, right? So kind of like
But if I'm
parameters. It can't just, I think, be free reign. You've got to have some parameters and some
right,
structure, but
right.
providing some opportunities throughout the learning
Okay.
environment. Not all the time, right? You got to have a little structure, but that's kind of like how I read it.
So what you're talking, okay, I like that interpretation
Oh,
much better than mine. I still like the Baskin
yeah,
and Robbins.
right.
But yeah, but yours is actually it makes more sense to what's going on. Here's my one problem with that, and that is, yeah, have choices, but make sure that those choices can be accessed by all
Oh, for sure.
students depending on the
Yeah,
materials, because you don't want somebody not to be able to do something because they are from a different economic strata that than maybe say the majority, and you don't want them to feel as though you know they are less than.
right. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, yes,
So yeah,
recognizing
okay.
the culture and climate of your students and the diversity of it, right? Um, but
Mm-hmm.
that's just kind of how just different things I thought about. Like your Baskin Robbins things was great. Hey, you've got 30 things to choose from. Blah, I don't want any of it. But we're like, here are your 3 things. You can either do it on a whiteboard, you can do it on a piece of paper, or you can do it on a Google Doc. What would you like to do? Oh, okay. And that's accessible to everybody, right? And you're going to show me that you know
There
it,
we are, and it's all
right?
right
So
there.
you've got a little choice, but you still have to do the
Mm-hmm.
work. I'm still going to assess how you're doing it, that kind of stuff. That's how I kind of see it.
Quick anecdote on that. I had the students, I said, in a group, and I said, I would like you to draw just a really quick sketch of a person. Just draw a person, and we're going to be doing this thing later on. And this one student just sat there, and he was slowly drawing, and he wasn't really drawing much of anything. And I came back about a half an hour later, and he was still working on the same thing. And I looked at him and I said,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Hey there.
do you remember I said a quick sketch?" He looked at me and he said, I feel like being Michelangelo today. And he did not rush his work. And then he went back to it. He never did finish. It was just his way
There
of
you go.
avoiding.
Yeah.
But yeah, so everything in here though sounds like it's meeting Maslow. Does it? That we're taking care of sense of self.
Right. Yeah.
And the last one is activities that develop sparks, interests, talents. Don't get rid of the health class. Don't get rid of music. Don't get rid of art, gym, drama, sports, because those are things that kids love. And just because you didn't like it doesn't mean that somebody else does
Philip.
not. Yeah, just because Philip doesn't like dodgeball. I mean,
it's not on the test.
Be sensible about
art,
dodgeball.
PE, music. It's not on the test. Recess is not on the test. We don't have time for that. It's not on the test.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I know that
okay.
we're kind of like we talked, and we could just keep going on and on about this. Yeah.
Oh, we could, and so I think we need to start wrapping up. But is anxiety neurological though?
Well,
and why would ADHD be more of a learning disability than anxiety?
It wouldn't, in my opinion. It's just the level of impact, right? How is it affecting you, right? How is it manifesting? Is your anxiety, is it physical? Are you having like, heavy breathing? I'm like, my stomach, I feel like I'm going to be nauseous, right? Is it the fight or flight, right? I'm so freaked out. I can't walk in the building. I can't stay in my class. I'm leaving to go to the bathroom all the time. I'm taking passes, right? So it's just, how is it manifesting and to what degree?
Right. And
so that's how I would answer that.
And how do we create an environment that can help decrease anxiety? And to be quite honest on this, you might do something that might trigger somebody's anxiety without even without any purposeful intent.
I'm sure I do. Right. I am a fast talker. And for some people, they're like, rah, I'm heightened just listening to you. I don't have that calm, soothing, slow voice that keeps people regulated.
Yes.
I don't tend to have that. I'm usually like, let's get it going. So for sure. And so, and some anxiety is good in small doses, right? In certain, like, you need to be anxious about something. That's what kind of gets things done. If you aren't anxious about that paper being turned in, it won't happen, right?
Well, are we confusing stress with? Are we confusing stress with anxiety, or is stress a form of anxiety? Because we do need eustress.
Yeah.
But but we don't need the bad stress. So, and eustress would be EU stress. Yeah. Because EU means good.
There's that. Yeah. It's just, is it chronic? Is it constant? Is it happening all the time in all areas of your day, in all of your environments, versus, I'm a little anxious about going to my, certain class because I didn't do the homework. And so, or I know I have to give a presentation today. And so I've got a little bit of that. Right. And so that kind of makes me, maybe it helps me keep my focus, but if it tips over, right, then I'm like, oh, I have that presentation. So I'm going to like fling, and then I take off, or I act out in class, right? Like, how do I adjust my behavior so that I can either regulate it and overcome it, or work through it, or persevere, or be resilient? Or does it kind of like take over? It's overwhelming to me where I can't function. I've got social phobia. I can't, that kind of stuff. Anyway.
So we need to work on our square breathing. We need to get rid of blue light.
Blue light?
And not check our phones. Maybe keep our phones someplace.
Oh, that's so hard for students. That's a whole nother. That's the next podcast. Phones and anxiety.
Yeah. That's true.
That's a hard one.
Even adults.
Oh yeah.
Even adults.
This was a good topic.
Okay. I think so. Thank you both very much. And with that, I think we're going to sign out. And I want to thank all of our listeners. Please subscribe. Please give us a review, because that's what helps us be seen by other people. And we enjoy bringing good content to all of you. So please spread the word. Thank you very much. And we will see you next week. Goodbye.